Well, I will kick off and say good morning. Mr. Bailey, I have to blame for this. Love it. He wakes us up with some energy, and I'm waking you up with a steely stare, although it'll become clear perhaps where this came from. But morning, it's lovely here in Nottingham before the bank holiday weekend. Hope we'll get you there for the 3-day weekend for the end of the week. And let's first tell us about ourselves. Paul, I'll go to you first for anyone who's new.
Yay! I get to go first. Sweet, great. So yeah, hello, good morning. My name is Paul Bailey. I'm a digital consultant with a design and innovation agency called Spark, and along with Alec, we've been running TechFast since. When was Paul here? Was it February 2019?
That is when it was, yeah.
Wow. Really passionate about design, really passionate about tech, and really passionate about Nottingham as well. So it's great to give people a bit of a platform to talk about some of the great work and some of the great stuff that's happening in our locality.
Absolutely. And Paul's also added this as seen on TV barrier. Now that's not our YouTube channel, although more about that to come. This still is from a TV show that I've been appearing in. So I promised Paul I would mention that. You know, it's had a bit of cachet to proceedings. So I'm currently on Channel 4, a cooking show called Beat the Chef. So in my spare time, as you see, I'm a wine connoisseur, but also a food blogger, food writer, and I was invited to be on this TV show. So 5:30 every day, there's a new competition where someone tries to beat the chef, and I'm one of the judges on that. So yeah, really interesting experience. I could talk lots about that, but yeah, not for today. Maybe I could, you know, if we do a lightning talk session, which we have done before, maybe I could do a lightning talk about being on TV. So I'll put myself straight into the ring on that one. Reference YouTube if you have missed a session. Have a look where I think at the grand total of 48. I had a look this morning, Paul. We've gone up another one, so we're perilously close.
Doubling it almost every month.
I know. So there's lots of fantastic talks on there. If you have missed any, this will be going on as well, obviously following the session. So have a look, have a search, and get involved on there. Lots of chat going on whilst Paul is doing his talk. We've obviously got the Q&A box for anyone to submit questions, and we can invite people to ask a question to Paul directly at the end as well. We're on the Tech Nottingham Slack channel, #TechFast Monthly, which is a great way to just sort of contribute throughout the session. I'll be tweeting away as well, #NotsTechFast, and that's NotTechFast as well on Twitter. And then Paul and I will also be doing other bits on LinkedIn and things like that. Talking of LinkedIn, I'm about to hit go on a post which will give you the opportunity to win a coveted TechFast mug. A little giveaway. I made a cup of tea this morning, not in a TechFast mug. And then I realized and poured it into my TechFast mug afterwards. So that was an error, but here it is. And apparently we're now signing them. So if you do also want one signed, let us know. But yeah, it will be my LinkedIn post that you just need to like, and then we'll have a look as to who the winners are at the end of the session. And then promised fabulous DDD team to talk again about them. So voting is open till the 4th of June for talks. I think that's right, Paul. People can submit talks anonymously, and then, you know, just people who are interested can vote for which ones they want to see at DDD.
Yeah, so I think now all the talks submissions are in, and you have the opportunity to choose what you want to hear about. But absolutely. I don't know if we didn't unfortunately have this last year, but the year before I attended, and this was a really brilliant event, completely free, whole day worth of, you know, really great speakers, and it was really fabulous to have this right in the slap bang in the middle of Nottingham. So yeah, if you've not heard of it, I'd really highly recommend that you take a look and get involved and choose some great talks for everybody to come and listen to, hopefully later in the year.
Absolutely, yeah. I think their approach in doing that is great. I was about to say, Paul, have you submitted a talk? But we shouldn't know that because we don't want to bias voting for it. Because that's the point. You know, you don't vote for the speaker, you vote for the talk, which is great. And also, the second round of tickets are available from 12:30 tomorrow. So the first round sold out like hotcakes, but you can go again tomorrow from 12:30. So fingers at the ready for that one. And if anyone else has any events or local things that they really want to promote, please just let us know. Things we can retweet or share or talk about next month as well. So yeah, get in touch. And then getting in touch with us as well to speak at future events. We've still got some good people lined up into the rest of the year, but always want to hear from people who are interested in speaking. We can support them if you haven't done too much before. Yeah, really just looking forward to seeing a wide range of people. Anything, Paul, that you want a call to action on that?
For me, what, for speakers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We've got so many great people in Nottingham that are doing some brilliant things. Every day I kind of seem to be talking to people and they're telling me about something in Nottingham that I just never heard about. So, if you've got something, even if it's not even, in a state of being ready to deliver, just get in touch. We're happy to kind of give you some support and some guidance on helping to shape a talk. And I think later in the year, we might do something around summertime where we give people the opportunity to do kind of mini talks. I think that seems to go down really well over Christmas. So maybe we'll try a bit of a summer version of that later in the year. So yeah, get in touch. We'll be happy to help you. And it would be really wonderful to have you talk with us here at TechFast.
Fantastic. So without further ado, over to, is that all right, Paul? Paul M, have you got enough time, or do you want me to?
we should be good. I've got the watch next to me to try and keep an eye on my rambling. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, you're the second member of the big head brigade. Is that what do we officially call people who are, get their face in lights?
The giant head. I think Paul's got quite a nice shot there. That's quite like a bit more an action shot, isn't it, rather than the.
Yeah, it's a good one. Right, let's do the technology changeover, and we're going to go over to Paul and his slides.
Okay. Are they showing okay? Brilliant.
Yep.
Yeah.
So first of all, welcome everyone. I had a look at the RSVP list last night. I noticed a number of current and ex-colleagues in there. So there is a little bit of a safety warning that goes with this talk. I do reference some real world examples from previous employment. Nobody on this RSVP list will recognize themselves or anyone they're aware of. Let's just say the example I give is about a Unix environment that predates Linux. So I think I'm fairly safe with most of the people around at the moment on that one. But what I'm going to talk about is a blame-free culture. And very much to me, while a personal blame-free culture is just as much as important as a work-based blame-free culture, and how trying to have blame-free in the workplace is really difficult if you don't identify your own personal characteristics around it and the difference it makes. So first of all, let's talk about what is blame-free. I've taken an example here from one of the government articles about cultural safety. It is an environment where individuals can report errors or near misses without fear of reprimand or punishment. There's a little bit beyond that for me as well, in the fact that an individual should feel safe to come forward and admit they made a mistake without fear of reprimand or blame or anything within their work culture making them feel personally responsible for something that they don't already feel responsible for. People who make mistakes don't sit there and go, yes, I've made a mistake, woohoo, let me go and run around the office and tell everyone. By the nature of our personalities and our behaviour, we already feel bad about making a mistake. A blame-free culture is about the people around you not adding on to that blame, not making you feel any worse, not enhancing how you feel, and very much importantly, not spreading it around the organisation you work with. And it's not just about incidents. It's not about your retrospectives. Blame-free comes up quite often in retros. Everyone go, we're going to run a blame-free retro. That's great. That's a really good place to start. But it is about your everyday culture. And we're going to go through some examples that are everyday and not just based around incidents and retrospectives and things like that. And by the end of it all, I'm hoping I'm going to give you some techniques to practice and improve your own personal blame-free culture in there. This is probably one of the most famous examples of this. This is a Toyota Anden cable. If you look across the photo, there is a little yellow cable running all the way across. That's in every Toyota production line around the world. Putting that cable stops the production line. The robots stop, the cars stop moving forward, and indicators go off to tell the people to stop. Anyone on that production line can pull that cable without any blame coming to them. And it's not just about their own work. It could be there is a mechanic working on the bonnet who spots a problem with a door that was fitted 3-4 processes down the line. They pull that cable, they stop, they indicate the problem. And the first thing the Toyota line managers do at that point is then start working out what happened to produce that door in such a state. There's no blame associated with pulling that Anden cable. It is all about producing the best car that Toyota are capable of producing, not just once, but every time a car goes to that production line, it has to be the best of their ability to produce, and that only works within a blame-free culture. If the person fitting the bonnet isn't worried about the door, because all they're getting rewarded for and recognised for is a really, really good fitted bonnet, they're going to ignore the door. The cultural recognition in there is about the whole car, the whole quality of the car, and everyone's responsibility in that. There's a whole article on Anden and the whole Toyota production system. Anyone who's worked in Agile or Lean will know that a lot of the culture around that's also come from the Toyota system. So go have a read some of the articles that they've produced on this. So what's the difference between blame versus fault? There's 2 examples there. These are taken from the Wiki Dictionary. So I've copied and pasted them. If you look at the difference in phrasing there, I blame the accident on them. It's their fault that we have not finished. Sometimes as human beings, it's difficult to understand the difference between those 2 things. They've both got an individual identifier in there, a person. But very much it's about fault and not blame in there. It is possible to make a mistake and cause something to go wrong. You have fault, there is fault involved in that. What is different is when people start blaming and taking the consequences of that fault and extrapolating it further and making that individual feel better. So as the pictures on the right show, there's a difference between finger pointing and holding someone and putting your arms around them and letting them know that actually you accept the fact there's been a problem in there. As I point out at the bottom there, you can't have blame without fault. This is normally one of the things that, especially in the technology industry, where loads of people put their hands up and say, no, well, you can. Yes, you can. I'm not covering that type of environment in this speech, this talk. It's very much about fault and blame. But when we get to the end of all of this, it is about the fact you can have fault without blame. And I'm going to cover later on about how much very important it is that you don't try and ignore fault by making an excuse. Oh, we've got a blame-free culture, so no one's at fault. Human beings can be at fault. It is possible for a human being to make mistakes. That doesn't mean we need to blame them for that problem and that mistake. And they're the examples we'll work through as we start going through this. So why is blame-free good? Anyone who's ever worked in a blame-free environment will know the general feeling that produces. The main summary is people want to work in a blame-free environment. They want problem and errors discovered and talked about. They want people to be able to come forward and say, actually, I think this is a problem. They themselves want to be able to come forward and say, you gave me this task to do. I really am sorry, I made a mistake. I misunderstood the timescales you gave me. I didn't realise you wanted it today. We never discussed that. Oh, I didn't quite understand the level of quality you wanted me to go through. Oh God, I didn't realise you wanted a PowerPoint slide because you said the word document. People want to be able to talk about the mistakes they've made without feeling like the person on the other side is just going to blame them and put all fault on them and leave them to figure out all the problems. From a quality point of view, you want to make sure anyone can speak up. The Anden cable is a prime example in that it's not just the expert with the particular process or part that speaks about the quality, it's anyone in that production line, which means you do really get that out of the box thinking. in software engineering, development in the technology industry, sometimes it is someone outside of that build cycle, a observer, a customer, a user who will come forward and go, actually, that just doesn't look right. It's not been spotted by the developers or the testers because they've focused on their specialisms. And sometimes they've very much got that rigid linear approach to what they're looking at. It takes that out of the box thinking about that. That should be encouraged. That really does add quality to the overall experience and the products that we produce. And it helps change the attitude from doing good to doing good from just doing my job. It is often in a culture that has a level of blame or finger pointing around fault. You'll hear the thing, oh, I was just doing my job. I was just doing what I was told. That's a defensive mechanism. We want to get back to that approach of overall, it's all of our responsibilities to make sure we do quality work, produce quality products. I want to do good. I have a job in doing good, but I also have the ability to speak up when I don't think I am doing good, or whether the work I'm doing isn't producing as good an output as I would expect. When you're working at that level of culture, the communications, the freedom of speech, the ability for people to speak up generates a totally different buzz in your work environment. It feels better, people engage more and speak up more, and people get much more involved in decision making because there is no fear of speaking out of turn or making a mistake in saying something that maybe other people think is stupid because you're not an expert in it. People working in those type of cultures recognise that value quite quickly in there. So what is the blame-free approach? For me, it focuses on 3 core tenets in there. What, not who, how, not why, and us, not you. So very much about this has become a problem because we didn't spot it, rather than this is a problem because you didn't do it right. The us becomes quite important in that language. Again, made a point there. We have when we're doing retros and lessons learned, there's a lot of focus on the 5 whys, but here I'm saying how, not why. I have some very specific examples of that as we go through and talk about the 5 whys a little bit more. And I'll give you an example of the actual tenets behind the 5 whys around that. But it's not just the words, it's also the tone. So as an example, I'm going to take the 2 phrases at the bottom there and say them slightly differently. Walking into a room after you find out there's been a problem and going, hey, who did this? Versus, hey, who did this? The tone is important in that one. The same again, hey, how did this happen? Versus, how did this happen? Becomes important as well. And it's very easy to say the right thing, but the wrong way. So you have to be conscious of both your tone and the language. So in my line of work, bugs get released into production. Anyone who's ever worked on bug-free code, we've got some jobs going, be very interested to hear. I'll be wanting lots of examples of working on solutions that have never ever had a bug in their entire life. We're humans. We are humans telling machines what to do. Problems and bugs do happen. But what you want to know is how that bug got out into production, not who wrote that code. It doesn't help that some of our tools have features to allow us to investigate what happened, git blame, GitHub history, commit history, merge results and things like that. Do make it easy for someone to go through and identify the person that wrote that piece of code. But that's the difference between fault and blame. And again, I'll go through some examples on that one. If it's a piece of code, it's more than likely been written by a person. So at the end of the day, there is a person at the end of that chain. That doesn't mean they're to blame, and it could be something to do with the process around that one. But remember your words and remember your tone in there. The real world examples I'll go through shortly will again show you the difference in that behaviour. And as I said, terror is human. People make mistakes. That's why in the DevOps culture, we make a lot of effort in removing the human beings from our processes to remove that fault tolerance and improve the fault tolerance in there. If anyone's seen my AutVal talk, I don't know whether it's available anymore because we weren't videoing them back then. Maybe it's an opportunity for me to go around and get a video up on that one. DevOps and that culture is all about making repeatable processes done by machines, which are really, really excellent about repeating a process exactly the same each and every time. Human beings, we're not very good at that. You give us the same process to run 10 times, and more than likely, times 8, 9, and 10 will be slightly different to time 1, because we are either getting tired and bored of doing it, or we think we found a better way of doing it because we're cleverer than the person that created the process in the first place, and we found some brilliant, brilliant shortcuts without the experience of the person who created the process in the first place, who discounted those shortcuts because they would produce fault in the process. But what we want to talk about is how our systems and processes produce those problems, not how the human beings. We have to accept the fact that human beings will make mistakes. It's part of our nature. It's part of what makes us humans. And as the picture on the right hand side says, what makes us above and beyond that in a blame-free culture is the ability to admit failure, admit we were part of the mistake, and admit our role and fault in that process, and to make sure the process can be fixed. If we're looking at a release of some code or a release process that doesn't go successfully, and all we focus on is the processes, but the person responsible doesn't feel comfortable to speak up and go, actually, I didn't follow step 8 on the process. I decided I didn't need to do it, so I didn't do step 8. They don't feel comfortable to speak up. They're not in that blame-free environment. You'll never know that process step 7s and 8 need looking at to avoid human being making a mistake again. So the people have to be able to speak up and have to be able to go, actually, I didn't follow step 8. I thought I knew something better. Really, I'm sorry. We improve the process at that point and make sure they can't skip step 8 as part of this. Now I want to move on to is that difference between person and work. If blame-free culture is important at work, then surely it's as important in your home and your personal life. So think back to your most recent, I'll use the word conflict, but discussion, disagreement, difference of opinions in your home life. Did you follow that blame-free culture? Did you listen to the person? Were you able to admit fault without apportioning blame? And yet the example I use here is why quite often do I end up on holiday without any clean underwear? Mainly because at some point my wife would suggest I'm an adult and quite capable of packing my own clothing. And I recognise that, but don't actually do anything about it. It's honestly really not my wife's fault that this happens to me. It is purely my responsibility. And we are getting better at that. We no longer have to make quick dashes to the local supermarket when we arrive at the destination. But they're normal examples along that. The one I'm going to talk through today is about an experience I had with one of my daughters. They were both horrified when they saw this presentation last year when I was drafting it all up. I've agreed to never actually admit which one of them it was. So very much like any colleagues, next colleagues on here are safe from the colleague experience I'm going to use, my daughters are absolutely safe from which one of the two of them is the example I use coming up. So let's look at that example. Again, real world example, this one, we were rushing to an appointment. It's a really important appointment. We were late, not unusual for any of us. Most of us, the more important the appointment is, the more we rush. I don't know whether you're the same as me. The closer the appointment is to my house, the later I am, because I assume it's just a 5-minute journey. I forget about getting in the car, getting my daughter in the car, getting the seatbelt, finding all the stuff we've left, and then getting 5 minutes down the road. So I was rushing, and my daughter wasn't. She was skipping along, quite happily, not paying any attention, and she fell over, flat on the floor. What happened next? I dropped into blame mode. What have you done? Why have you fallen over? Why are you skipping? Don't you know we're late for this appointment? It's just not good enough. Anyone tell me? I mean, Does that help with a 6-year-old who's just fallen on the floor with a bruised knee and a banged head? Did that get me to the appointment on time? Did it stop her crying? None of those things. We were late and we ran into the reception area where we're going, with me holding a 6-year-old screaming in tears, demanding to be put down and never wanting to speak to me again. Wasn't a good experience for the doctors. That one, lots of strange looks from everyone in the reception area, as well as a doctor as part of that. But that was my reaction, and we'll come back to my analysis of that afterwards. But let's look at the work example. So Friday afternoon, we'd identified the fact that one of the servers was going to run out of disk space at some point over the weekend. So a colleague of mine decided to go and tidy up the temp folder. Anyone who's reading ahead on the slides and has any experience of Linux will be looking at the third bullet point and going, oh, and then some of the expletives I use as well. They made a fatal mistake. They were in the root folder of the machine, logged on as root. Again, anyone with more modern experience of Linux and some of the safety measures in there will go, well, you can't do that. Loads of prompts will pop up, or it'll be aliased out, so you can't do that. This was well over 20 years ago. None of those safety measures existed back then. And my colleague typed that and started watching a screen flash by as it deleted critical system files, and the alarm went off and the server started shutting down. Friday afternoon. What happened next? Well, I shouted at them. I blamed them. I may have called them the odd name. I definitely used some stronger language than I did use with my daughter when she fell over. Definitely some expletives in there. Definitely some personal references about their behaviour and capabilities were in there. Did it help? No, because my colleague was then a little bit shell-shocked and not able to help me diagnose what happened. My colleague ended up defensive. Oh, it wasn't me. Yeah, no, it was. There's a command history. Oh, I was in another folder. No, you weren't. We spent more time discussing why it wasn't their fault than trying to remediate what the problem was. We wasted time. Now, at the end of the day, me, that colleague, and a whole number of people had to work the weekend to restore that server. But spending time shouting at them and blaming them and calling them names wasn't helping get the problem fixed. And not only delayed it all the time during that shouting, but delayed it while my colleague calmed down, was able to talk us through what happened and also to help us with the problem. It was not a successful intervention to a critical problem. But the behaviours both the same there. And I very much talk about me and my reaction and how it affected the response, and how blame drove that response, rather than the actual response of the people involved. So what were my options? I could have followed the blame-free culture on that one. I could have followed the things we learn in retros and incident manager around that one. So my daughter's fallen over, she's on the ground, she's crying. Okay, first question, are you okay? Are you hurt? Can you tell me what happened? Calming, discussing, checking that they're okay first, because that's actually the most important thing. That's the one thing that's going to get me to my appointment anywhere near on time, is a happy cooperative daughter who's willing to carry on rushing with me. Want to know what happened? Oh, I fell over skipping. Okay, great. Can we carry on? Yes, okay, I'm much happy to carry on now. Right, could we rush and perhaps not skip? That would be a really good next step for me, if that's okay, daughter X. And that would have been a much better response. We'd have probably been up off the ground, moving to the appointment at a similar pace within probably a minute, rather than the 5 minutes it took for me to shout, indicate blame, and also to calm her down enough so I felt comfortable moving on with her. Similar for the colleague. They've just made a critical error that's potentially going to impact the business and their colleagues. The first thing I should have asked is, are you okay? They knew they'd done something wrong. They knew how bad it was, and they knew that they were at fault. So my first question should have been, are you okay? And anyone who's been involved in an incident with me since then will know they are literally the first words I now use. If something goes wrong, the first thing I use with the people involved is, are you okay? you must be shook up by this. Are you okay to help me fix it? Do I need to put you to one side and get other people to help me fix it? Do I need to go and get help? Do you want me to tell people what happened rather than you have to tell them? How can I help explain what happened without you feeling any worse about that? That emotional stability of, I have made a critical fault that is in some cases potentially job threatening, to the point where we can talk about it freely and have that discussion, is very, very important in this blame-free culture. You do have to be a little bit aware of passive-aggressive options about that. So you were skipping, were you? Okay, well, you're not very good at skipping, are you? Maybe we shouldn't do that again. Children are quite good at picking up on that. Adults are very, very good at picking up on that one. So again, language and tone, really, really important on that one. But the same responses are the same. Personal or work, don't make the person feel any worse for the mistake they've just made. Get them into a better state of mind, better emotional stability, and then together you can work out what to do to prevent it from happening next time or to fix the problem. And the acronym for that is THINK. The first thing you say is the most important thing. That first reaction. If your first reaction is, what an idiot, what have you done? That's all that individual is going to take from that incident or that particular problem. So think, is it true? I doubt very much they are an idiot. They made a mistake. My daughters most definitely aren't idiots, nor are they clumsy, nor are they foolish. She made a mistake. Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And most importantly, is it kind? Hey, looks like there was a problem with that command you were running there. Can we just take a look at it? I think you've caused a problem. We're going to have to fix this. Can you explain what happened to me? I'd like to help you fix it. Totally different response to, what an idiot, what have you done? Expletive, 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 expletive. I don't want to get the video banned on YouTube, so or for Alec or Paul to have to be bleeping things out, so I won't use any of the expletives on that one. But again, the wording, the tone, supportive, helpful, emotionally stable, getting the person into the right place such that they're going to help you explain what happened, the right level of detail, and then help you fix it. So if you just take this THINK acronym away from this talk and apply that in both personal and work environments where you're having a fault discovered or an incident found and investigated, then I could stop the presentation here, because that will make the biggest difference to you and your colleagues in dealing with these problems and also in your personal life. But this brings back to it. We don't want to do blame, but there was fault there. In my daughter's life example, we were rushing, and she probably shouldn't have been skipping. She should have been paying attention to the fact we were rushing and helped me to get to the location in time. So yeah, she fell over because she was skipping, not because we were in a rush, but because she was skipping. For my colleague, he shouldn't have been getting this rush to done. We had to do it on the Friday, but he shouldn't have been rushing to get it done because he wanted, it was a Friday, he wanted to finish on time and get home. But in return, we should have had a process for that. He should have done some basic checks. He should have checked it out, maybe got a colleague over to look and work it over with him. So he did make a mistake. He was at fault. He shouldn't have been doing it the way he was doing. But we allowed that to happen as an organization, as a technical team. But that's where the blame versus fault comes in. And we'll talk again a little bit more about why you've still got to have fault without the blame. And you do have to be aware of malicious intent. Sometimes people don't make mistakes. Sometimes people maliciously introduce bugs, errors, or fault into your process. That is a totally different thing. That is what performance management and personal life counselling is for, to help you with that. If it's malicious intent, then the blame-free culture sort of drops out at that point, and you have to drop down to much more formal processes on that. So I ran 2 5 why sessions on that one. So for my daughter, why did she fall over? as we said before, she was skipping. Why was she skipping? She just thought we were going out for a walk, and she was having fun, and she wanted to have fun while we were walking to the appointment. And she's not very good at skipping. Why isn't she any good at skipping? Well, turns out we've never really shown her how to skip, and she was learning for herself for the first time, and she was just having a go at it. But important for me is when we went through this conversation with her, she didn't know we were in a rush. I hadn't explained we were late and why the appointment was so important, and why we had to rush. So I took out that lessons learned. If I'm ever rushing with our daughters again, I clearly explain when we are rushing. And when we're not rushing, perhaps I should spend some time focus on her skipping and helping her skip. I definitely do the first one now. The second one, my 17 and 14-year-old no longer want to learn skipping from me. So I don't do the skipping so much anymore, nor did they seem to want to learn skipping from me when they were younger either. But I do explain now when we're in a rush and why it's important and what I expect from them. Then I ran the second 5 why sessions. Why did I behave? Why did I end up carrying a 6-year-old screaming and crying and pulling away from me into a doctor's reception? I shouted. Why did I shout? Why was I angry? Why was being late for this appointment more important than my daughter's health and feelings? And why didn't I take time to think? And it all comes back to that first emotional reaction to something. I identified I was shocked and angry. I didn't want to accept the fact I was at fault, which if you look at the incident 5 whys, I hadn't explained we were rushing. So actually the root cause of the incident was I hadn't explained to my daughter we were rushing. I didn't want to accept my own fault or take any blame for this. I just immediately defensively pushed it all outwards. It was my daughter's fault for falling over. We're going to be late because of her. It's not good enough. She's a rubbish skipper. Maybe she shouldn't skip anymore, and maybe she should just focus on what we are doing. I did that analysis afterwards, and again, that changed my behaviour and how I deal with my daughters when things go wrong. Am I perfect? No, I'm still a human being. I still sometimes get emotionally invested in that. There's a lot of difference between being a little bit late for a doctor's appointment to not making the checking at the airplane on time because they were shopping for toys. The scale of emotion kicks in at that point. But do this. So when you do a 5 why session, focus on the 5 whys on the incident, but also really, really important, do one about your reaction, both as an individual and a team. Sometimes your 5 whys, your reaction, you can do in private. You can sit down and go through how you dealt with the incident, the behavioural problem, the fault, and how you reacted, and decide whether you want to do something about it or not, or you can do it as a group. But you need to understand how to improve your behaviour around that to get that true blame-free culture working and running. And yet, for anyone who is remembering back to the slides, I did say how, not why. So these are some of the rules of the 5 whys. Number 10, assess the process and not the people, and never leave human error or blame as the root cause. And actually removing the why, even though you keep the process, and changing the wordings to how or what, really do change that tone. So why did this piece of code get released? Because Paul released it without doing a check. Okay, why did this piece of code get released? Because our process allows that to be released without someone doing a final check on it. Is a lot different. We still need me to come forward and go, hey, actually, I should have checked it, but I didn't. That's what the blame-free culture allows. The fault diagnostics, the incident response, and the moving forward is the bit that says, well, our process is wrong. If it allowed you as a human being to make a mistake, our process is wrong. We should change our process to remove that error and ability for humans to make mistakes from there. So I changed the words of the 5 why. How did my daughter fall over? How did skipping cause her to fall over? How can she get better at skipping? And how did she not know we were in a rush? They give slightly different answers and allow us to remove the responsibility from an individual. But don't spend a load of time trying to reword your question. If why is the right thing to ask, that's okay. Just don't let the end of the conversation and the answer be a person. Move beyond that to make sure you cover the process that should protect that person, and move the blame from there as well. This becomes quite an important one. I've had lots of discussions with people about blame-free culture over the years. And if you just talk about blame-free, people feel suddenly that accountability stops not being necessary. Oh, I don't need to worry about this because we're in a blame-free culture. So if I don't do it, no one's going to blame me. That's not the same as fault. You still have to have accountability. So if you said you are going to do something and didn't, you are at fault. You may not be blamed because it may be something else that's got in your way. It could be something else that's happened. It could be something you didn't understand about the commitment you made. But there is still fault in there, and you still had accountability. The blame-free culture just lets you speak up and have your say on it in a safe environment, and doesn't stop you being accountable. A blame-free culture used to hide accountability is just as unsafe as not having a blame-free culture in the first place, because what you will find is the blame will be hidden and not talked about, because there's a feeling that people aren't being accountable for the commitments they make, and they're responsible for the faults they take in there. So don't let blame-free be used as an excuse for not being accountable for your work or other people's work. That still has to exist in there. Again, both in organizations and in personal life. I am absolutely accountable to making sure my holiday luggage is packed correctly. I understand that one. We can even do a racing model about it if my wife wants to. If we do a racing model, she definitely has to be informed about my packing being done correctly. That's my last final check in the process. But I'm still accountable for it. And the same in work life. If you say you're going to do something, you've been given a task, you have to follow a process, you're still accountable for following that process. And like every skill, you've got to take practice in this. Self-awareness of fault is really, really hard. As in the example with my daughter, it'd been very easy for me not to sit back and go, how did I make her cry? How was it my fault that we were running into doctor's reception with her in tears? It could have just easily just carried on with everything being her fault and pointing the blame in there. You've got to sit back and look about your role to play in the other person's feelings and the other person's reaction. And you will never be perfect at this. It is a continual practice one. I do still shout at my daughters. I still do get angry with them. A little bit harder to make them cry nowadays, but you know, I feel uncomfortable sometimes with how I talk to my children. I take that, I go, I practice, and I make it better. The same in the work life. How do you practice? Here's a good one for everyone to try. The next time you're in a shop or a retail experience or a restaurant or a cafe and you're having a bad experience, practice a blame-free culture. Look for fault, not blame. Oh, I can't believe you've served me this rubbish food. Oh, I can't believe the queues have go bad. Can't you do something about the queues? It's more than likely the individual you're talking to is just part of a chain of a process and a chain of responsibility. And they want to help you. They're in retail, it's a service culture, they want to help you. What they don't want to feel is the blame for the experience you're having. They more than probably want to help you. If you can reverse that around, change the wording to what, not who, and change it to a positive tone and look at your own feelings around that, you will actually find you have a much better experience. Hey, I'm sorry, this food isn't quite cooked right. Is there anything we can do about it? We'll get a better response than, hey, why have you given me this rubbish food? It's cold. The blame will only drive a defensive behaviour from the individual because you're making it their fault and their responsibility. The shared description and shared fault will allow them to offer to help and work you with it. So give it a go. Next time you have a bad experience in retail, try the blame-free culture, look at some of the things we've gone there, go back to that THINK acronym and see whether you can apply that and just see your experience change. And from Joe Strummer from The Clash, when you blame yourself, you learn from it. When you blame someone else, you don't learn nothing. Because, hey, it's not your fault, it's his fault over there. And that's exactly the same in personal and work. If everything was always my daughter's fault, I would never become a better parent, because I would never learn how to work with my children better and how to understand them better and how to help them grow as people. I have to take responsibility. And it's the same as a manager in a technology and an engineering team. I have to take some fault for some things that in there. Perhaps I should have reviewed that process a little bit earlier. Perhaps I should have gone through and reviewed our practices and our coding standards sooner. And done that rather than just let people carry on doing things like that one. I have to take fault. And that's the end of the presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. I'm sure a virtual round of applause from everyone as ever. That's the thing you don't get when you did the first one. You got, obviously waves of adoration and applause, and you've just got Paul and I's faces to go on today. One thing I did want to clarify: Daughter X. That was anonymous. You're not employing an Elon Musk, naming system for your children. Just checking.
No, it was a generic word. They're not in alphabetical numerical order in any way whatsoever. No.
That's right. Just making sure. Fantastic.
You might get 2 less subscribers for your YouTube channel when I share the link with friends as well, by the way.
Well, that's a big cut in our subscribers. So we need more to make up for it. Brilliant. We might have some questions. Paul, have you been?
Yes, we do. We've got a few questions. So let's, Yvette, if we allow you to speak, if you want to ask your question, Yvette, you should be live now.
Hello.
Good morning.
Great talk, Paul. Really interesting. And it's surprising how much this happens, isn't it? Like, without even thinking.
Yeah.
My question is, so when people bring up past incidents in like a jokey way, like how do you handle that? Because I feel that sometimes that's more damaging than the incident itself.
Yes, it is. I suppose the first thing is, again, look back at that responsibility and fault. Is there value in bringing up that past incident? Actually, are we repeating the same problems and not fixing that root cause? Because it may be a valid thing to bring in at that point. Yeah, you know what, this did happen this time last year. In one organisation I worked in, clock changes was very, very a common problem. And every 6 months we'd hold an incident because we hadn't fixed how to change the clocks. So it can be valid to bring it up. The important thing about that blame-free culture is, again, not track it back to an individual at that point. Or if it's not valid to bring it up, just try and cut that conversation off. So thanks for the input. We don't believe that applies this time. We'll put it to one side. If at the end of where we've got to, you still think it's valid to reference back to that past incident, we'll bring it up then. But let's finish going through this incident and see where we get to at the end of it all. If it is something that keeps reoccurring, then yeah, that may take your fault diagnosis and 5 whys in a totally different direction. Or it may be you need to do a 5 whys on your incident process. Why do we keep having incidents where we take actions and no one does the actions? So it may be you need to do a high level retro on your incident management process to go, why don't we actually take the actions from the incident and do anything about it? Does that help?
Yeah, it does. My point is more like, when things, it hasn't happened again, but people just bring it up in a kind of jokey way, just saying, oh, well, at least it wasn't as bad as this in the past.
Okay.
I mean, and it's a bit like, oh, come on, guys, get over it now.
Yeah, I think that comes back to reinforcing the blame-free approach and the discussions in there, and just trying to cut that down a little bit. Is like, okay, that's not relevant to what we're talking about now. Maybe if it's the same people that keep doing it, a separate chat with them and going back to that think clause. And very much, if you look at the haters, is it helpful? No, it's not helpful bringing that up, is it? And just keep reinforcing that one. And perhaps just some coaching for those people about the effect it has bringing up past history in those, because it will drain people in the room, especially if the people in the room were involved in that and really don't want reminding about it. I think you would have to tackle it on more directly and go, okay, let's park it over here. We'll come back to it at the end, and then have a separate conversation with them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, Paul, I think sometimes people aren't aware of, that having that little joke, oh, it's not as bad as when you did, it's impacting people. Sometimes it's just about having a conversation, isn't it? And making people aware that actually that is impacting that person in a negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got another question from Praveen. So just give me a sec. Let's see if we can access Praveen. So Praveen, if you want to, do you want to ask your question? You're now live.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Paul, for giving a valuable insight. I have a question with respect to the handling errors. So it can happen for the first time, second time, and third time. So can you just share some insight on that one? How to handle error that is kind of a similar error that a person is doing? It happens for the first time, and second time, and the third time. Because we can't have handle it to the same level at all the time.
And no, that's fine, and it's not uncommon in larger, fast-paced organisations. They tend to end up with three root causes on that one. Sometimes it is a person. Sometimes you go through incidents and you end up with the same root cause, and you identify it's the same individual who is the root cause for this. That ends up with a training program for that individual. We noticed that we've had 3 outages over the past 6 months, and it's always been when you've been on the release team, or it's always been your module that's been causing that problem. That is a training program that the person just may not have the right skills or experience, and they may misunderstand their job. And that is work with the line manager, get that person some training and boost them up. It's very, very rarely because the person's not capable of doing the job. It's just that they perhaps haven't had the right training or experience. Maybe they've moved into the role, or maybe they're working on new technology or older technology they've not touched for a while. The second root cause is potentially just the system itself. You're working on old technology that is unstable, and you can't fix it, and you just have to accept that. To be honest, get that into your risk management process, get someone to raise a risk about that, and get it visible to everyone, and get everyone to share that risk rather than people who are on the front line of that incident management program. Escalate it up to your management team as much as you can and get it raised as risk. The third one is your incident process just isn't strong enough for people to go and fix things after an incident has happened. So the work either doesn't get created in the right place, or it gets created and not prioritized because, oh, it's happened. What's the problem with it? We can't fix past, let's leave it. If that happens a second time, someone has to escalate that says, actually, it's not good enough anymore. These actions from the previous incident now need fixing, they now need timescales against them, and they now need allocating with the higher priority around it. So look at which of those 3 root causes are causing the repeat, and work with the people involved to get them prevented again. Is that okay for you, Praveen?
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Okay. Thanks for Praveen for your question. We have got time for a couple more questions. I think we're just getting close to.
Yeah, I was going to say just before we can have some more questions, but I was going to announce the competition winner just before that to make sure.
Go on then.
I know the whole of Nottingham is on tenterhooks to hear. So the winner is selected at random from people who like the LinkedIn post and are on this call. Rebecca Cranham selected at random. Rebecca, transformation manager at Scape. I don't know if you're a regular, Rebecca, but fabulous for you to join today and get in touch with myself or Paul, and we'll get a TechFast mug over to you.
Rebecca, if you could get in touch with us and send us your address. So, we had an address challenge over the last couple of months, but that will be rectified, and mugs will be on their way, I think, to Brian, Alan, Paul as well, today's speaker, and Rob Rantal as well. So we'll also make sure that you get a mug in the post at the earliest convenience.
Fantastic. You can drop back to the questions if people are happy to hang around for a few more. If you are, Paul.
Yes. So I think we've actually got a question from.
It's my day off. I can go as long as I want. Let's do it. Let's have an all-dayer. Let's do it.
And to be fair, I can always blame you guys as I'm late from the first meeting.
Are you looking forward to the meeting? We can keep it running as long as you want. If you're not, it depends what it is.
So we've probably got the last question then. So Alan Buxley, you are now live.
Oh, I was just responding to what Praveen had said. You know, if something happens a second time, and Paul actually reinforced it with his reply, you know, maybe not all lessons were learned, maybe something happened in too close a time frame and processes were continuing whilst the fixes weren't in place, or maybe you didn't actually capture everything if you did your 5 whys, etc., the root cause to allow it to happen again. If it happens a third or fourth time, well, yeah, it's a different conversation probably to be had.
Yeah, it's very unlikely luck plays a part in this, and the response of, well, stuff happens, really isn't an end outcome from a 5 whys incident retro.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's great talk, Paul.
Cheers,
Some interesting highlights, and obviously it's being able to sort of appreciate the differences in when tone is different and understanding how you play a part in it as well.
Yeah, and definitely carry on practicing it in a more social and personal environment rather than just at work. That really does help you manage your language better.
great. Thank you very much, Alan. I think we're up on time, aren't we now?
Yeah, we are.
Alec, do you want to wrap things up then, Alec?
Yeah, no problem. So we will be looking at announcing the speaker for next month soon. So keep an eye out for that. Just to say, really, yeah, thanks to everyone for joining. Thanks, obviously, to Paul for a fantastic talk. We'll have the recording out at some point. When does it tend to go out, Paul? How long does it take you to?
Yes.
You've got a long weekend.
Yeah, I've got a long weekend. Great.
What more could you want than editing the TechFast video? Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, if you want to share any resources or slides or anything like that, let us know and we can get that out there. But yeah, you know, hopefully you enjoyed being the first ever returning speaker.
It's an honor.
Fantastic to have you. We'll book you in for 2023. Every 2 years, you know, you've got a residency now. So yeah, get thinking about your talk, and yeah, just say everyone have a great long weekend, and yeah, see you next time.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers everybody.
Bye.
Take care.